Hello, I am Brian Rump, and we are here with my good friend Rachel, and we are going to talk about body and money. So, I am Brian Rump. I am the creator of the financial safety method. I help business owners and high capacity professionals relate to money with more calm, clarity, and choice. And I integrate finance, behavior, and hypnosis. I act as a business coach and do a lot of working with businesses. And through some of my networking, I met Rachel, and Rachel's going to introduce herself in a moment. And we thought it would be really fun to just jump in and live record some conversation to talk about body and money. So, Rachel, tell us about you.
Yes, thank you so much, Brian. I'm excited to be here with you today. And I'm Rachel Zurer. I am a coach, a love your life coach for high achievers. I help high achievers move from what we're all are already good at, the accomplishing and the getting things done achievement, basically, to a life that has more the skills of high alignment, which is more right brain, more intuitive, more has to do more with feelings. The biggest regret people have when they get to the number one regret people have on their deathbeds is that they didn't have the courage to live a life that was true to themselves. They were doing things for other people. And that's so common for so many of us. And it's not just courage, it's skill. So I teach people, we go real deep and we find what they really want. We find the blocks that are in the way that are often conditioning from childhood and old stories that we don't even know are there. So you and I are both helping people rewrite stories in a big way to have more abundance and joy and meaning. And I have a background in both yoga teaching and a bodywork modality called biodynamic craniosacral. It's very, very nervous system focused. And a lot of the work I do with people is in the body. And so as you and I started talking about, we getting to know each other, we realized that there could be a really interesting conversation to have at this intersection of body wisdom and nervous system and money stories. And we just got excited to chat and see what magic would come through here. So I'm very excited to find out.
I love it. It's so much magic, and so much of what you just said really aligns with the type of work that I love doing, because I truly think that, like, the path to happiness in this life is alignment. It's finding what you're really good at and doing that. I believe that humans naturally want to create and collaborate. So, and then kind of getting rid of what's in the way of being able to do that. And a lot of that is old programming. I love to use the language old stories.
Mhm.
So we have these old stories, we have these inherited beliefs, we have all of this stuff that gets in the way of us truly aligning with who we are. And I love that you said it's not just, I think, courage, it's also a
Mhm.
skill. So we
Mhm.
have to practice these things and integrate them. And the more I've been, focusing on money and helping people rewrite their money stories and doing that through finding financial safety, it aligns with everything you're doing as well. Because I would guess that a lot of people's barriers to doing that work have something to do with money. They're
Sure.
afraid of, oh, if I you know, stop doing, this thing, then maybe the money will dry up and, everything will crash and burn and, and
Yeah.
my whole life will be gone. So I wanted to, yeah, kind of jump in and talk about those things and then understand that money plays a role in this. Uh,
Absolutely.
and, my angle on it is, I'm a trauma of money practitioner. I've been a commercial banker. I've been on the kind of quote unquote reality side of money and money systems for 20 years now. 2006 is when I started working in finance. And the more I got into decisions, why people do different things, why people are so unhappy that I would meet, like in my banker office, whether it's personal or commercial stuff. And the more I could see people's magic and always trying to like help them and guide them and give them advice and information. But then once I started uh, a few years ago down the road of trauma of money, started doing my own hypnosis work and my own body work, I just realized, like, when we bring in some of that kind of quote unquote woo woo stuff, that's when the magic happens for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, some things that are coming up just listening to you. One, yes, definitely people, our society is rarely going to um reject you or punish you, or your mom or your great aunt is very unlikely going to give you crap for, unless you come from a very unusual family, for pursuing a financially stable thing.
Yeah.
And nobody really cares if you're completely miserable. It's like we have decided it's an okay straight trade-off in our cultural, at large. I know this is not like literally everyone, but it's like it's totally fine to choose money over happiness, over family, over all sorts of good things. And doing the opposite is quite countercultural and risky. Like if you're, and it doesn't even need to mean that you necessarily have financial hardship, but to prioritize something other than financial stability is very, very edgy and scary and risky. And it doesn't even mean you necessarily have to give up financial stability. But just the risk of it is like, it's much less, you're much less likely to get a pat on the head for saying no to something financially stable because your soul doesn't want you to, there's certain other cultures, but that was something that was coming up for me as I was hearing you say that. So, there's emotional wealth and there's financial wealth, and our society very much values financial wealth more, which is why we have so many emotionally miserable people. So, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be either or, but if you're only optimizing for one, you're not going to end up with.
It's so true. And it's funny because even as we jump in, there's this immediate paradigm or story that it's one or the other, that that choosing the regular paycheck and being miserable is, you know, a choice, or being happy and broke is another choice. And when we do that work to really align, like it's going to be both. And when you talk about working with these like high achieving individuals, that high achievement to me, or that drive, I work with a lot of business owners.
Me too.
Like you naturally are going to want to create and grow and move, and that is very human. So it's really hard when we actually pause and break down that conversation to see how somebody like that is going to starve or have to live outdoors because they can't find a way to have the money that they want. And that's part of the work of, to me, pausing, finding that financial safety and realize like, oh, there's other things I want to do, that, or other things I can do to keep myself safe, and opportunity will come up. And, the choice isn't, quit your job and get thrown out onto the streets. Like it's more robust than that. And in our society, just in general on safety, like pretty much, there's supports available. There's ways to live inside. There's ways to eat. There's ways to take care of those basic physical needs. And often the people we see who aren't in that position suffer from something else. There's mental health, there's addictions. It's not regular people kind of walking around who was like, one day I was a lawyer and then I decided to give it all up and now I live on the streets because nothing I do will kind of bring me the money I need to live inside.
Right. Yes, I remember going through this in one of my early decisions that I was making about choosing um, meaning over security in a certain way. And it was just a job change. It was from I had a full-time job at a big name magazine. I used to be a magazine editor and a writer that I had been at for a long time. And I wasn't super happy. I was kind of burning out, but it had good things going. And then I got an offer for another magazine. It was like two magazine jobs. and and as I did the negotiation, the offers themselves ended up being almost identical. Like money wise and benefits were pretty similar. Like I think the salaries were literally identical. And benefits were fairly comparable. Like it was like, but it was really just, am I going to go from this established thing that's well known, that's sparkly, that has a strong reputation, into something that was a startup that had a smaller audience, but it was a cool opportunity for me. I was going to have a different role, and I was going to it ended up being an incredibly meaningful job change. It was from Backpacker Magazine to Conscious Companies. I had this weekend where I like went home on Friday with these 2 offers clarified, and I needed to tell everybody my Monday. And I happened to be in a yoga teacher training. That weekend, I was also doing a ton of being in my body a lot, and then being in stillness and rest a lot. And I really saw how part of my fear was that, like, if I chose this other magazine, like, it was less stable, like it had only been around for a year. What if it folded? And then I was like, wait a minute. I am a very competent person with a strong resume who's at the time married to a lawyer. Like, with, for me, I had a lot of privilege. There's generational support. If worst case scenario, if my parents would let me move in back with back in with them, there was like a lot of, I was just like, but my brain was telling me this story. Like, the feeling in my body about this decision was as if, taking this risk, which, like, by so many standards was hardly even a risk. It was a full-time salary that was the same salary, but like, my brain created a story where it was a huge risk, and then my body was in such a fear state that it took work to distinguish that, like, this was not a life or death decision. This was not a decision that was gonna, get me thrown out of a tribe or have me on the streets like that. I was like, oh, right, kind of the worst case I can imagine here is that I choose this magazine and it goes under pretty soon, and then I have to find another job. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna end up on the streets. But so this is where we get into the body, is that sense of safety, that sense of is a very embodied experience. We feel safe or unsafe in the body. And there's a lot of old stories that show up, that aren't even necessarily, a lot of what I teach, they aren't even necessarily from our own lifetime. This is a little bit, you could see it from a woo way, but there's also a epigenetic, very sciencey version of this, where we inherit the conditions and the traumas that our ancestors went through. And so if our ancestors were in a really, really, deeply poor, struggling experience, like, there's a sense of unsafety that came through culturally and physically. And so there's this whole body of work we can do around the body of work. That was not on purpose, but I got myself.
It's magic. Magic happens.
There's a whole body of work we can do around noticing the literal fear in our body, not just fear as an idea, but fear in the body, and then understanding it more, meeting it with compassion, and then differentiating from, like, oh, right, this feeling that I might die is definitely not about taking a salaried job at a less established magazine. Like, but it took really a lot of space to see that.
I love that you could recognize that. I have famously been, my hypnotist coach and original hypnosis, and the person who's trained me, we were having coffee last week, and it's been about 4 years since I started down that road. And he reminded me that his first challenge when I walked into his office was like, how do I get this guy to understand that he has emotions? Because I suppressed everything.
Yes.
I was not connected to my body. So as this stuff comes up and I look back on my life, I'm like, oh, wow, like, my body has been showing me things the whole time. And a couple, as they kind of link to money, is, when you talk about that decision to leave jobs, a friend of mine a few years ago, I was talking about some decision, and he was like, oh, wow, your body made that choice for you. And he's like, and as I recall, your body made the choice for you when you left the bank. And I had never thought of it that way, but the day I decided and knew I needed to leave banking, my face was numb. And I was at my desk, and at the time, it was a time, this was Bank of Montreal. And when I'd started in commercial banking, there was like 8 people working on the floor my office was at. And then everyone started retiring, and they didn't replace them. And our district changed, and my boss changed, and they eliminated our admin support unit without the backup plan in place yet. So I was so overwhelmed, and even the furnace bearing was out of the furnace, and the furnace was right by my office. So I was like sitting in this office managing like all these people's work, the only one on the floor, and my face was just numb. And I got a notification from the library that a book I had on hold was available. And it was Jim Tree Living, who you may not be familiar with as much in the United States. He owns a lot of businesses in the US, but he also owns a chain in Canada called Boston Pizza. And he used to be an RCMP officer. And in his book, he talks about
what's an RCMP?
Oh yeah, RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
Okay,
so
great. Thank you.
You ever see like the trope of the Canadian Mountie?
Totally.
Yeah. And so I had this numb face, and I like walk up to the library, and I'm like sitting on a bench in front of the library, and he talks about that move for him of like steady job, police, to leaving it and opening up like a pizza restaurant, which at the time was like unheard of. Everyone thought he was crazy, but he was like, every time the phone rang, he was like, I just, could not answer it. Like, did not want to answer it, wanted to puke a little bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is me. Mm-hmm. And that was like, to me, a major decision point in my life, and this big move away from, the steady salary and pension. And I ended up going to a startup, and, my career's kind of progressed since then. But I would think back, I'm like, I had no tools to understand my body and like that awareness of like what was going on. And we live with all of these things, and we could dive into some of them that relate to money and business owners, high achieving people who want to live in that, make a choice of living that alignment. I just think it's like a non-negotiable to start doing some of this work. Last week I was thinking I'm kind of anti-hustle bro. So when it comes to like money and finance and business, all the content we see is a lot of like hustle bro stuff. But I realized like I am hustle bro about one thing, which is like we have to go through and like look internally. And then in business or even achievement, like we have to dive into our money stuff and our money stories. And like as we do that, inevitably we have to look at our body and our emotions and our nervous system, and doing that work. So the work you do, the work I do, to me, I just believe is like really the only way to get that true embodied alignment in our life.
Yeah. I mean, money is wrapped up in kind of the three core needs that I teach that we all are kind of constantly seeking for. And the more we can get them from inside, the more power and alignment we'll have, but approval, control, and security. And money, you can tie money into each of those, right? And so,
yeah.
And also, love and health are kind of the other big ones, I would say. But yeah, that all of those really require looking inside. And that thing you were saying about being really disconnected from your feelings and from your body, I think that's incredibly common. Again, we have many hundreds of years, I would say, of being rewarded and out of necessity to our survival as children became very important for many of us to learn that disconnection. It's something that was actually very adaptive. So in my work, we're always appreciating where the thing that's maybe misaligned at this point comes from, but it's like, yeah, that made sense. That helped you get through some things, and it helped you get to where you are right now, which is, great. And if you want something different, you're gonna have to learn something different. And, the body will scream. I mean, when I was the editor of Conscious Company magazine, it was about, mission-driven businesses. And so I had the privilege of interviewing dozens and dozens of founders and CEOs of different, all different scales, from like Organic Valley, billion-dollar company, to tiny little, very cool, like creative startups. And so many people had a story of their body telling them they couldn't keep going. And they were often very dramatic. They were like heart attacks and cancer and, or a big death, maybe with someone else's body, like a big death, but there's something that shook them up, that had them be like, I can't ignore this anymore. I can't ignore how this is working. And there's quite a possibility. So the body will keep knocking until you hear it, and the knocks will get louder and louder and louder. But there is a possibility of, as we come back into more awareness, more acceptance, more skill with listening to what the body is telling us, with moving emotions, which are really just energy in the body, with understanding that differentiation I was talking about, like, oh, my body's telling a story that's related to the past. It's actually not about right now. And I can be with the discomfort of that, and I can bring presence to it. As we do all that, we start to be able to listen to subtler and subtler cues in the body, so that it becomes this very potent instrument of alignment that doesn't need to wait until you're getting hit by a 2x4 or your face is numb. It can be a little
Yeah.
tingle that tells you not to say yes to an appointment. Like, it doesn't need to be so dramatic when we're more tuned into the subtle. But for many of us, tuning into the subtle is quite a journey.
Yeah. And it's a journey that's just so worth it. And in my own practice, in my own taking my own medicine, that's where I'm at currently, is like really trying to connect with my body and being like, oh, what's that mean? And just being able to take those little steps has been so empowering for me. And so I want it for everybody. And when we talk about, business and achieving, some of those things you said are just so common in business, and they become so accepted. And I want to acknowledge first that, with money stories or these adaptive measures, they often help us get where we are. Mm-hmm. So most high successful business people, these stories, these behaviors, they get us to where we are right now. But then there's that switch of like, oh, they're not going to get us to that next level. Yeah. And that's where I love working with business owners, because often they might be at a ceiling, and what they really internally want is something much bigger. But there's usually a silent pattern that's getting in the way of them doing that. And that's the part where, we need to change up those stories. And quickly, my favorite example that I see often is something like taking on debt. And people who are raised where, debt is evil, debt is really bad. If you have debt, you are a, bad person. And they will work so hard to grow a business without any debt. Yet internally, they might want a big business that's 10 times the size that it is, or it's in a certain industry that frankly just requires debt and capital intensive, machinery, equipment, building repairs. If you look at anybody who's really rich and wealthy, the debt is a part of that. It's a tool we have as a society. When we look at so much of the growth in consumerism, standard of living, everything over the last 50 years or more, it all comes with increased access to debt and credit. Yet there's people who are raised where they just can't do that because, grandpa told them not to. They might puke when they look at or want to puke, right? It comes up like this idea of like, oh, I got to puke if I see the debt, or the stress of it like hurts their heart. And responsible use of debt is just necessary in certain types of businesses. So when we help people feel safe and embodied in that, knowing that, well, if I invest in this, piece of machinery that's going to allow me to employ more people and grow my business, suddenly you can have that excitement of growth and creating and leading again without that, quiet, maybe tension, or even that loud scream of like the wanting to puke, or just that overall shame, just like holding your body back.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a great example. And I'm curious how you would work with that with somebody, if that was something that was coming up. And I tend to work more with service providers, so it's not as much of like the core, key to growing a business for the entrepreneurs I tend to attract. But at the same time, I think it's a really great example. And for me, it would be, we would be looking at like, whose voice is that in your head? And is that a voice that you really want to trust with business advice? And okay, oh wow, okay, that's my grandpa. Yeah, I don't think I would hire my grandpa as a business advisor for this company I'm currently running. So like getting clear on that, you know, like with the mind layer that there's a story, but then it's also, can I really like fully be with that feeling of wanting to puke? Can I let myself feel like I want to puke without running away from it, and let that movement complete in my body? And then, you know, see what's after it. There's the skill of that. But then also, you know, maybe I get clear that, yeah, I do want to do this. And I haven't completely gotten rid of that feeling of wanting to puke, but can I just learn to breathe with it and choose that I'm going to do it anyway? And I'm going to take it as different information. I'm not going to take it as this is the wrong path. I'm going to take it as, oh, I'm doing something new and exciting and it's going to feel uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, it's true to be able to, yeah, learn to live with it without that suppression or that shame. And when that shame comes up, one of the best things I learned in Trauma of Money is we just immediately ask it two questions: based on what and according to who.
mm,
And often this is where we find it can be generationally. I mean, when you talk about, you know, past lives, epigenetics, like we can't ignore those things when we talk about money and trauma of money, because in our own families, you know, depending where everyone grew up, different countries, different counties, we got relationship of, you know, women, race relations. These are real things that impacted the bodies of, you know, the grandparents who might have lost their homes, you know. So it comes from a place of safety and love when grandpa says never ever get a mortgage, because maybe grandpa didn't ever lose a house, but grandpa's dad and grandpa probably did, because there was some times, if we take the United States, where it was very boom and bust, and it was very common for people to actually lose their houses. So in a lifetime, you know, people might have kind of lost their houses and then rebounded 3 or 4 times, and they go through that roller coaster. Whereas now it's not very common that you lose your house and are kicked out on the street. Like there's choices that come into play before that becomes the danger. And then there's also, you know, past times when institutions would fail and
mhm.
banks, and people would lose all their money. It's not really where we are nowadays. So understanding where that idea comes from, you know, again, maybe we don't want grandpa in charge of our business. And we get these views often where we think our parents or grandparents were these great geniuses or epic people, and they were maybe just a person, right?
Certainly, they were certainly just a person.
Yeah, I heard someone once said, she's like, it was a woman talking about her own trauma, and she said, my life changed the moment I realized that my dad was just some guy.
It's so good.
Right. And it's so true. Um, so we can learn and we can understand, like, okay, this sick feeling is coming from this programming. Now we can take a breath and maybe look at the rationality behind the decision. Because the other layer is, you know, did I sit and go through the, um, you know, the math or the understanding of maybe what am I borrowing for, right? Is it truly investment in growth and leading? Or I know somebody else who borrows because they're trying to impress grandpa who's not even here anymore.
Yeah.
Specifically, someone who his only goal in business was to bring the company back to where grandpa had it. And
Mm,
specifically, it was a number of vehicles. So it's like, grandpa had this many machines. I need to bring, for the honor of the family, bring it back to this place. And that's not really aligning either. And that's where this becomes a journey and of alignment to really know, like, what do I want to
yeah.
do? What is my path? And when I look at the money stories, it's which are the ones that are getting in your way of where you really want to go. And that's where the work of discerning that stuff
Yes.
is.
So yeah, so much there. Yes. Realizing our parents are just people, realizing we inherit so much from our families that we can't, it's like the water we swim in. We don't even see that there's another possibility until we start really looking. And I think money stories and love story, those are both like stories about what money
Yeah.
is, story about what love. They're very intertwined for a
Oh,
lot
it
of
really
people.
is. Money, like money, love, food, those are kind of, to me, there's so much similarity between them. And money is the entry point that I've chosen to work in, because it literally is in the room everywhere, always. Like and most people avoid it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to talk about it. I've joked about, there's a money talk I have in my mind that I want to bring out that's very like theatrical. And in the town I'm in, I've taken up some community theater, and a couple of my roles, one I was like in a toga, and everyone like laughs about like um this toga moment. And even on theater day, like the theater person shows like a picture of me in the toga for like their social media posts. So it's like the town gets to see my nipples over and over. And I'm like, I should just do this show almost naked, because people would rather me probably see them naked than talk about their finances sometimes. But bringing that up, I mean, it's the key to unlocking everything, because it's that silent, yeah, it's just this silent looming energy that, can just drag us down.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it is back to we get confused about what money is. Like,
Yeah.
it's I mean, first of all, you were talking about woo, but like money is literally imaginary. Like it's just a system we agreed to
Yeah.
create of keeping track of how energy is moving, and what's more within that. But then we really do mix it up that that it is approval, that it is control, that it is security, and the number of rich people who are miserable and sick and can't do anything about it like makes it very clear that's not accurate. It's not
Yeah.
accurate, and that it's a very easy the momentum towards falling into that trap is so strong. I mean, it's something that I'm constantly needing to guide my brain out of. It's like my brain is a
Yeah.
toddler or a puppy, and it just needs again and again to be shown like no, actually, like you could like it's really quite in some ways quite a spiritual thing to trust that our worth and our lovability and our safety are not actually tied up with money. There's all these monks that walk around with just like nothing. This is part of what
Yeah.
there's a whole Buddhist monk, the thing is you just walk around with your bowl. You have your robe and your bowl and your sandals, and you just trust that your life will be provided for by God, by the people around you. I mean, there's this way where it's, we're so hyper individualistic. It's like we have to control it all. We have to take care of it all. And it's just not possible. There's a certain amount of softening into trusting something else.
Yeah. It's such a, we get programmed to want to isolate. And
Mhm.
even in money, if you start I talk to a lot of people about money, and there's this pattern that emerges where some people are like, if I was rich and I had all this money, they would do things like move to the woods and, develop a homestead and not have to deal with people. Yet, I'm sorry, but humans are meant to collaborate. Money it's just an accepted story that we've had for thousands of years. And when I would teach economics, I had a lot of international students, and I would, ask who had different types of money and cash on them. And like some of those pieces of paper are literally worth nothing to somebody else, right? Like, yes, I could go somewhere and maybe exchange them a bit, but they're just a paper, and that paper only has value because we've all agreed and accepted the story that that piece of paper has value. Yet connecting with people, collaborating, trusting the system, or just trusting that other humans will figure it out, I think is part of that finding safety.
Mhm.
And we often worry, people worry about the apocalypse all the time. I will sometimes say, like, we forget that only a few years ago, we went through a major world shutdown with like COVID and supply chains shut down, and people don't even remember it now. And so much managed to like kind of get through, and we collectively survived. And yes, maybe it wasn't ideal for everybody, but things will keep moving. So when you can kind of accept that like humans will find a way, there will be options that come up. Maybe it takes away some of that tension of like, I need to save as much of my own money as possible, or, bury all the gold bars in my backyard. And I joke too, people who do that, I'm like, well, now I know where your house is. I'll just come take your gold bars. Like if the world ends, like at some point we have to trust, right? We trust whatever maybe higher power we believe in. We trust kind of the goodness of humanity, and that we'll always have some options for survival. So that could take away some of that edge of, everything's going to end for me right away if I don't do this thing.
Well, and part of the work, like I said, this feeling of sufficiency, the feeling of enoughness, which is what we're all really aiming for, and we're chasing money to think it'll give it to us, and it won't ever. It literally won't ever. You can talk to, it's so easy to believe that it will, but so many millionaires and billionaires stories where it's just very clear it won't ever. Sufficiency is
There's
something.
There's a bit of a rule around that, which is whatever amount of money you have, most people believe that 3 times that is what's enough for them and what would make them comfortable. And there's a book called Happy Go Money, and in that work, it's like a universal rule. Like you ask a billionaire, they have 1 billion, like what's enough? Probably 3 billion.
That is really fascinating. I love knowing that. And so then the trick is, can I really, really not just have the idea, but bring it all the way into the body, into a sense of calm, present nervous system state, sufficiency in this moment with exactly what is here right now. My business coach, who runs she runs a $15 million a year business now, first started building her business when she had a negative bank account and didn't know where her next meal was coming from. And she talks a lot about it was only by trusting that she was sufficient in that moment and had something to offer, because she had these tools for emotional safety that most people don't have, that she was able to build a momentum to get to where she is today. That sufficiency was necessary even when the circumstances, the news on the outside did not seem very abundant. I mean, and in some ways she was, way better off than people in some, very impoverished nations, because she was here in the US and could make it work. It was this idea of sufficiency and enoughness, like you can only ever feel it in the moment.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you really, really check, if you really, 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 really check in the absolute exact present moment, is there enough? In this moment, if I'm not worrying about the future, if I'm not worrying about the past, in this moment, do I have enough? Even under really challenging circumstances, for this moment, like this breath, the answer will always be yes. And that is a practice, but then helping the body really notice that and feel it, and getting the skills of understanding what the messages the body is telling you. What is my, can I even notice what's happening? Oh my gosh, my belly's clenched, my shoulders are tight, and I'm in a constant state of stress and anxiety. We can start to find ways to address that, so that we can then believe that sufficiency more and more often. And it's totally a practice. It takes will. It takes discipline.
It does. Yeah, it takes that choice, right? Like it's empowering to learn that we get to choose our thoughts, and we get to choose meaning. So we have you talked at the start about meaning, and one of my language I love using is, when we talk about money specifically, people will think it's like math and math problems, but it's a meaning problem, and the meaning we place on it. And in my hypnosis work, there's a lovely formula that we use, which is, any event, what it is, plus meaning, and we get to choose the meaning that goes on that. That meaning elicits an emotion. So that event happens, we choose the meaning, our mind, our thoughts then brings us that emotion. and that's our experience. So when we can change the meaning in that moment, we change the emotion and it changes our experience. So once you can know that of like, am I safe in this moment? Do I have enough in this moment? Now we're not becoming overtaken by these fear, this worry, anxiety, especially around money. I've watched, it's funny, when I was a banker, it was this weird phenomenon where kids would come in and their parents had sent them to the bank to like start their retirement accounts because they were like so worried about their retirement. And it's like, you're an 18-year-old kid. Like, that should not be a crippling fear for you in that moment. Now, yes, there might be times where, we could set some things up and we can pre-plan, but in that moment, that shouldn't be like worrying you or setting you back. And
Right.
that happens in business all the time. Like, business, if I put on my microeconomics teaching hat, like it's a game and we're kind of playing it every day. And really the goal is like to survive moment to moment to moment. And people get worried about, well, if I do this, what will happen in 5 years? Or if I do this, how will I do this? And myself included, I've looked back and I realize how much time and thought and like energy you lose by over worrying about things or over strategizing in the future when it really comes back to that moment, right? And what's the action I could take in this moment? And when we could do that in alignment and creativity, then it's going to work out.
Yeah, from a sense of we're playing a game, gosh, everything gets more fun and more interesting. And that I love what you're talking about. I totally on the same page around there's the event or the circumstance and then the thought and the meaning about it and then the emotions. And you can kind of play with, you can pull up an emotion too to help you believe a story. But changing that meaning, that's something we have the power of. And one that I really love is just this idea of, entrepreneurship is a game of risk and reward. Like if you are taking on higher risk than you do when you're getting a salary but you have the opportunity for much more reward, but you have to be able to be with the risk. And one of the thoughts that I like that helps, have a more relaxed or playful or creative feelings around the circumstance of I'm choosing entrepreneurship, I am choosing risk and reward, is the sense of like, oh, whatever's happening now, it's part of a really good triumph story. Like,
Yes.
there's no good plot. You would never watch a movie about somebody who just like tries something and then it goes really well and then it keeps going really well and then it's great. Like there's no such story because it's not a story. There's no interest in it. And I don't actually think most of us would love it that much either if we were in it. The like opportunity to overcome challenges and obstacles and setbacks and moments where it seems like all is lost and then it's not. Like that is what gives life meaning. Like dopamine and does that comes when we feel like we're along the path towards something meaningful. Dopamine being a brain chemical that creates satisfaction. It's like we don't necessarily have it as much when we get to the goal as we do when we trust we're on the path to something meaningful. And that's just a story we can tell ourselves. So
I love that. And learning to be the author in your own story is a big part of, this, of our identity, of our money story as well, right? It's like, what is the story we want? And like, I'm the author and we can change the meaning of these moments a little bit and work within them. I love it. Not to switch, but what I want to make sure we get to is a really common sign of money showing up in a fear and our body is lower back pain. There's a school of thought which is all back pain is really emotional pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been dabbling and following some Louise Hay. And Louise Hay is an author, has a great book called You Can Heal Your Body, You Can Heal Your Life. And lower back pain is described as financial fear. And I could see in my own life and trauma that coming up. this is a whole other side story, but when I was a kid, I had this mystery back pain in my lower back. And I remember like puking at school. It was like so bad. And I did all these tests and was like just all, run to the hospitals. And it was this mystery that could never really be solved. And, when I was younger, I dealt with like when I was 18 years old, I could hardly touch my toes because my back was just in pain all of the time. And the more woo I get and unpack so much of that, I'm like, oh, totally tracks, because I don't deal with it now. I'm like rarely have any back pain now, but when it shows up, I'll be like, oh, what's going on internally, or what's my, and so sometimes I need to use my own tools to bring myself back to that financial safety. But when I talk about that and I just think about entrepreneurs and highly successful people who deal with things like back pain, they deal with that feeling of puking, heart stuff, anxiety. The other one even is like, and we celebrate this one, it's like lack of sleep, right? It's just everywhere. So I'm curious what you think about the back pain one.
I hadn't heard that specifically. It's really interesting. I mean, I definitely think that our attention and our nervous systems and just our nervous system state has a vastly enormous influence on our well-being in ways that are far-reaching and mysterious, way beyond what we can understand. And so it feels totally plausible to me that there would be a mechanism for that, a particular kind of tightening and a particular kind of pain, and things showing up in certain ways. I think a lot of the mind and the body are, we tend to live a lot in the mind in our society and way less in the body, and they're much less separate than we think, and really inseparable. And I'm like, yeah, I believe it. I believe it could be. It's not something that I don't particularly like specialize in those kinds of maps, but I do know from the craniosacral work, which I do, which is very, very deeply just like nervous system, that it's very mysterious what can happen when your nervous system relaxes.
Yeah.
All sorts of, because a contracted nervous system that's in a state of fear all the time is going to, and fear can be activation, and fear can also be a form of collapse. Like there's this sort of window of presence that we ideally want to be in, and then you can be in a stress state up and out with fight or flight and a lot of like tension, and then you can also be in a stress state dropping out of like a tiredness and a collapse and and in either of those, the body is not doing its job of the brilliant homeostasis that it can do, of all these ways that it regulates and comes back into balance or based on the conditions. It can do that really well in this window of presence. And if you're out of it, and most of us spend a ton of our life out of it, especially in the upstate for high achievers, that's where they live, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes they collapse down, and a lot of us don't have a lot of experience or time in that window of presence, and expanding it and spending more time there is really desirable. It's where creativity happens, and it's where the body is in its most healthful state. And so all sorts of things get cut, just these normal processes of balance and cleaning and regulation get cut off when we're in that constant state of stress. And so money, fear, and back pain, yeah, I'm totally open to that idea.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's not, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to tell everybody that their back pain is because of that. Again, when we get open to the idea, I think when you walk down that track, it's probably there's a money thing going on, which is similar for everybody. But bringing it back to that, I love that you talked about that window of presence and that language. In trauma of money, there's a trauma of money method of dealing with our money stuff. And step one is that. It's like, where are we in our window of, resilience, window of presence? And really doing the work to bring us in there. And part of that is like, when I talk about financial safety, it really is about how do we get to that it's kind of safe and secure in being present. And when we uncover our money stories, often the goal of that is to become aware of them And we get that like nervous system release of like, oh, that's why I do that. And we can calm down. And that's the best place to make decisions from.
Mm.
And when we look at behavioral economics, like humans make terrible decisions when aroused or activated.
Totally.
And almost like, why we spend, what we, where we decide to live, all of this stuff is all based on like activation. So when we can come into that window of presence and realize like, oh, what do I really want? What do I love? And I love this work because everyone's unique, and there are people who love leading and having big, maybe impacts. And there's a set of decisions they need to make financially to be able to do that. Often, if people are in that stress of like, steady paycheck to not, they might find themselves, they're working in a machine that doesn't actually serve them. And the amount of money that's enough to them could be half of what they're making or having now. And there's decisions that they can make in their life to make that feel really good for them so they can get to that alignment. Other people who high ambition, high success, they might have some massive, massive dreams of what they really want. And when we can help you feel safe doing that, suddenly you can shed maybe all the things that are getting in the way and maybe take these bigger leaps and, end up, quote unquote, making like way more money than they maybe ever thought possible. And yeah, I don't know where I was summing that up, but I'll just kind of drop it right there and see what you have to say.
Taking a pause and feeling in. Yeah, I mean, our stories of what we need and what is enough and why are definitely worth challenging. And we get to these set points. And yes, everyone is different. Everyone has their own true desires. I mean, I really see it that part of the work I do is helping people get the stories out of the way so that they can really acknowledge the desires that are coming through them. We don't choose our desires. We don't choose the thing that we are crazy about or that we long for. Like this is to me is sort of how the soul expresses, or how we each get, come, we are totally unique, and honoring the flavor of longing or passion that we bring is one of the bigger gifts we can have, because what we're able to do from that place of passion and creativity what somebody who's passionate about what they're doing is willing to do and can do from a place of desire. Oh, and I remember what I was going to say too, is when you were talking about somebody potentially, leaving a paycheck and then actually like pulling down their outflow so that they can be happier and maybe not spend as much. For me, whatever you're doing, one of the secrets to it of this, we're talking about this meaning, creating the feeling, there's the circumstance. Well, if you make the meaning that I'm doing this from desire, I'm really choosing, you can really like point towards, okay, I'm going to tighten my belt for a little bit because I really, really want this thing, versus the sense of obligation, or being a victim. That also completely changes the game. It can be an adventure. It can be fun. It can be exciting. It can be, you can still feel the grief of something or the fear, but just really there's a lot of power in choosing your agency around what like owning what you want, and then let yourself really want it, and then move from there. And then the creativity and passion that comes from when you're really connected to desire is like, that's where true matters.
I love that. And I wrote this down, that we don't choose our desire. I haven't heard that before, but I will share in my own journey. I have been so guided by shoulds, and even believing like, oh, I should want this. I should do this. I should take this job. And I realized a few years ago, I was like, I don't have any of my own goals. Like even goals that it's like, these are goals I should have. These are, in business on yourself, right? Like it's so easy to get caught up in this. You should have a pipeline, and you should have this much revenue, and you should want this. We look on Instagram and it tells us where we should want to travel, where the lifestyle we should want to lead. And I've done all these unpackings of like, what do I desire? Like, where am I happiest? And I will say for me, it's on the more minimalist side, but with some like environments that I love. Like, I'm not going to be super minimalist guy, but like a lot of my favorite times are like camping or like sitting around a campfire. And there are some conveniences I like. It's nice to have hot water at the ready. So, but, I also like, drinking out of the same coffee mug all the time. So why do I need 30 of them? Right? Like, I can just enjoy the process of washing the one or two that I have. So when you start realizing that, now it becomes easier to make those decisions of what you want to be doing. And when we suspend our judgment on what other people are choosing, I love like enabling people and helping them see their gifts and seeing their path for them. And I know lots of people who love like, a bougie lifestyle. And, maybe they want to live in, downtown New York City, right? There's a cost that comes to that. But if that's where you thrive and align, then it's about how do you create the life you want where, you can have that. But it does come down to this, the agency of choice, right? And unlocking our desires and then understanding kind of the money reality sequence of choices you may have to make or understand so that you can get that life that you really.
Well put.
Awesome. This has been an amazing conversation. I would love to, in a moment, just each talk about how people work with us.
Yeah.
And any final thoughts. I will lead off by saying one of the things I didn't catch here, which might resonate with a lot of people who are going to listen to this when it comes to money and body, is talking about things like money, pricing, investment. And, you talked about a lot of the people you attract might not be dealing with kind of the debt monster or coming around to that idea, but just finding that safety in talking about how much it costs somebody to work with them. You might find your voice tone changes a bit. You might find your eyes start moving around and darting around. So that could be a big place of finding that safety to be able to have those conversations. So that's one of the things that I do. So for people working with me, I help you find that financial safety. I am a business coach. I do have a 30-day journey where I can help specifically with pricing. It could also be a debt one. So I typically always have a free clarity conversation with everybody. And then we pick a 30-day journey to start with. And if it's I'm all in on your business and money decisions, I have a year-long journey as well that I guide people through. But for me, everything comes with a conversation or starts with a conversation. I work really well with other coaches. I'm a great sidekick. So if anyone heard is like, I'd like to talk to that guy, that means I want to talk to you. So Rachel, how do people work with you?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I also offer a free first conversation. Mine's a bit more in depth. It's a 75-minute where we really dive into mapping out all different areas of your life and where they are and where they could be going. So that's available. And I work one-on-one with people for 6 months usually, because we're really doing some deep habit changing and learning new skills and really getting good at noticing what the body's doing and learning new ways to be with it and expanding that window of presence. I do have something I want people to know about. If you enjoyed my point of view, I have a weekly newsletter that I send out that I've been writing for 4 or 5 years now, and I have some raving fans on it, people who tell me it's the one email they love and they open and look forward to every week for years. So that, and also a few different free resources and tools are available on my website, wildgenius.com. I also post a pretty good amount of social media content, videos, short videos on Instagram, and posts on LinkedIn. And so I was a magazine editor and content creator before I was a coach. So there's a lot of ways to start to get to know me and get into the content without a full investment. I'm just recently posting a preparation sheet for difficult conversations that helps you get ready for that. And I also have a set of question journal prompts on my website that people can use to, if they have a sense that there's like a new business idea coming out of them, that what they've been doing isn't where they want to go. It's called 15 questions to ask as your soul business gestates. So it's like ways to start tuning into that wisdom. So those are all on my website. I need to make sure you can find them all from the front page, but they're all there. And so, yeah, would love to have folks come along for the ride. And that's how we get started. And I'd say a really good sign that you might be a good candidate to work with me is if you look at your calendar for the week and your stomach drops and you're just like, or your shoulders get tight and you're just like, ugh, you feel like you're doing a lot out of obligation. That is a good sign that the type of work I do could be a good fit for you.
I love that. That is great. You do have a great newsletter. I know that I have lots of friends with newsletters and I get bombarded with lots of them. Not bombarded, but I love seeing them show up. And yeah, yours are really great. And specifically, I could tell you were in the magazine business because your other content, like there's, some of it is just so memorable, which is maybe the best compliment I can get. Right? It's like, because when you're in this business and you have a lot of brilliant friends, you see a lot of brilliant stuff. So to have your stuff show up is great. Awesome. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
I would say that if anybody is wondering about how to start getting to know their body more, it is a lifelong ongoing practice. But for me, a big part of it was actually doing fitness things that really, really were having you pay a lot of attention. So yoga or ecstatic dance or Pilates can be good, but these things where you're really, really getting specific and really noticing what's going on inside your body and with your breath as you're doing something in your body. I would highly recommend, just if somebody's like, I don't know anything about my body, how do I start it? Some kind of those are a few, but some kind of fitness experience where the teacher is constantly directing your attention to notice the nuances of your body can really, really start to reconnect those neural pathways, and you're getting a workout in at the same time.
Awesome. I love that. That's just a perfect place to end off today. So thank you for being here, and we'll see what happens when we start sharing this video. So
all right. Thanks so much, Brian. It was so fun to talk. And we didn't plan our matching outfit.